Take me away.
Right guys, thought I'd just run through my main casting rods for you, why not? Starting off from the left here, I have the M427SU Zziplex, then we have the Zziplex TXL with a standard tip and a slightly longer tip. We have Zziplex Full Tournament, and we have an Icon Light Sport. Through the four main rods I use in the field. We'll go through each one individually, discuss sort of the lengths, the actions, the ring spacings, whatnot, what different weights I use them for, and take it from there. So we'll start off with the Zeteque TXL. Okay, let's start with the Zziplex Zeteque TXL. Wow, what a powerhouse! Absolute animal of a rod. Easily the most powerful rod I've ever owned. It's a 7'2" butt and a 6'9", no 6 foot. Let's check here. 7'2" butt and a 6'11" tip. So it's unusual for Zziplex rods. The butt's actually longer than the tip. I believe this was an evolution of the standard Zeteque, and the TXL obviously stands for Tournament XL. It's a 27mm butt, tapers down to a 4mm tip. Well, just over 4mm the top, maybe about 4.3mm top. The butt section, especially on a Mark 1, if you can get a hold of one, which is this, is incredibly stiff. The tip, because it's such a short tip, under 7 feet, and it's quite a fat rod, it tapers down very, very quickly. The tip has a very, very fast taper. Overall, the tip's quite stiff as well, but the real part of this rod is sort of this section here on the butt. It's unbelievable. Fishing for this rod, with this rod, you're talking big skate, possibly I don't know, taupe, blue shark if you can get them from the shore. Anything else is probably a bit overkill for this rod, but they do a GT version with a glass tip with better sensitivity. But this I've actually, the furthest cast I've ever done officially was cast with this rod, so this is my main casting rod. I love it. There's nothing to build wise. There's a set of breakaway coasters, bit of shrink tube. I don't actually use the rod the full length. I have my hand about there, so that's 14.1. So I'm talking about maybe 13.9, 13.10. I use the rod at. I use this for 200 gram, 175 gram, 150 gram. So actually I have it marked up. My hand spacing will be to about, let me see, about there. So if I'm casting 200 gram, drops to there. That's 175, 150, and occasionally I do 125 gram on it down to there. So it's just shrink tube up to the grip. I actually find a lot of people don't like putting shrink tube there. Feel it adds a bit of weight, but I find, especially if I'm practicing casting a lot and it's wet, if I have stopped the shrink tube there, I'm reeling in here, it's very, the blanket's very slippy and your hand slips on it, so I prefer to have a bit of shrink tube from there to there. Plus I actually believe it just helps firm that section up in between your two hands, because I don't really want any bend in that section at all. Good solid lever. It's been painted red, which is actually Mars red. This actually was owned by a caster from down south. Very excellent caster called Andrew Gormley. Some of you know of him. So he painted this in Mars red. Minimum rings on it, that'll be a 30mm ring. I'll go to the tip. If I can get away with it, most of my casting rods have minimum 4 rings, so that'll be 25mm, 20mm, 16mm, 12mm, 12mm, 10mm, and then a tip ring. So it's this rod here is 7 7+ tip is what I use it at. Some people might use 6+ tip or 8+ tip. I like the 7+ tip. I think I've replaced the tip ring on it. I believe it's a Fuji MGAT MGAT. It's an absolute beast of a rod. The funny thing is, I used to cast with a full tournament for years, maybe 10 years ago, and I love that rod and still do. And I achieved all my PBs up to about 2 years ago in the full tournament. When I go from the full tournament to this feels twice the rod of the full tournament. That's not to say the full tournaments can't do the same distance. Of course, it probably can. It just bends more. But I love the feel of this rod. It really feels like sometimes when I'm casting the full tournament with bigger weights, it feels very spongy. But it could just be, it's more than likely my technique isn't spot on. The weight's not correctly lined up. But I do love this rod. It's my go-to rod. Hopefully the World Championships will be on next year. This will be the main rod I'll be using for at least 175, 150, possibly 125 gram. What I used to do when I only had the one rod, Andrew got another tip built up for this TXL, which as you can see is about 7-8 inches longer. So I experimented for a while using the longer rod for 100 gram. Because 100 gram is so much lighter, the leverage doesn't work against you as much. So this tip's actually had not that much use for me. And this is rung up. There's actually, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7+ tip on this, plus the butt ring. So this, with this tip, it'll be an 8+ tip rod. Starts off with the same dimensions and finishes the same, so it's just a slightly slower tapered tip. It's a bit more user friendly, probably a wee bit more given the tip. Coincidentally, it's exact same length and dimensions as an M427SU tip, but I've been told it's actually not an M427SU tip. It is in fact a special custom TXL tip. So that's my pride and joy. So that'll be, I'll have that for years to come. I might even get a spare standard tip built up at some stage, just to have a backup. So I'll show you a quick picture of the rod in action here. I think this is probably with 150 gram lead. So if you have a look at this picture. As you can see, there's not really much give in the bottom section of the tip. It's very, very, very firm. So what I'll do a screenshot of my ring spacings that I posted. Anyway, I've got a wee jotter, I keep ring spacings in, so I'll screenshot that, put this up here as well so you can see the spacings I have in the TXL for the standard tip and the long tip. I just went to the ad there. The overall length of the TXL, I don't know if I mentioned it, the TXL is 14'1". The M427 is 14'4". And the nifty thing is, the 427 and TXL, everything's interchangeable. So if you really wanted to, I can put the M427 tip into the TXL butt. Like it's a bit tight in that butt actually. But you end up with a rod maybe 14'8", 14'10", which is probably too long really for any kind of casting, for me anyway. So just an interesting wee factor. I think they're built on a similar mandrel, as it were. So butts and tips are interchangeable on 427s and Zeteques. Okay, let's move on to the Zziplex M427SU, which is the newest rod I've got, the one I bought sort of brand new myself a couple months ago. Fortunately, I haven't really casted that much due to coronavirus at present, but this is a shorter butt than the TXL, similar dimensions. Well, I measured up at 26mm, but it could be the TXL is just a bit thicker with a red paint on it, but 6'10" butt and a 7'6" tip. So the tip, a bit of a shorter butt than the TXL, and a longer tip. This is one of the most popular casting rods in the UK on the tournament fields, and a lot of big casters use them. Steve Lewis used one, got a few medals at the Worlds. Mark Matthews uses one. I'm not too sure what other guys use them, but there's quite a lot of guys use the M427SU. For me, I thought I'd do this in Zziplex colours, so there's sort of blue and red thing going on throughout. As usual, shrink tube up to the grip, and then the spacings for different weights. Actually, the drops for each weight the same no matter what rod I'm using, so I've laid the rods out side by side to make sure the drop lengths are the same. So, because I always use 150 on the TXL and 175. I don't really cast. I've never actually cast 175 on this rod yet, so that's my 150 drop, 125 drop, and 100 gram drop. Using this a lot on 100 gram at the moment and 125. So I've got blue breakaway coasters, blue, red trim on the grip, recently varnished decals, blue and red trim, and then I've got these are actually Fuji SIC light carp rings, which have a bit of an insert in them. Just happen to be a spare set I have, which I'll probably have changed to minnows at some stage. Blue and red finish again. Same with the tip. You know, there'll be overall this is a 7+ tip, so there'll be 6 main rings on the tip, 1 on the butt, and again blue and red, blue and red, blue and red, and ends again with a Fuji MGAT MGAT as I call it, tip ring, which will be a 12mm. So 30mm butt ring, 25, 20, 16, 12, 12, 10, and then because the tip ring sort of sometimes sits at a bit of an angle, the final ring's 10, but I always put a 12mm tip ring on it, so it's not, because it's sitting at that angle a wee bit, there can be a bit of a restriction there, so I put a slightly bigger tip ring on just to make sure so it's all lined up. So when you look down in there, all you can see is a nice cone for the line to zoom through. So unfortunately I haven't really cast this rod much. I'll show you a picture here of the action of it, in action as it were. So that's the M427 in action. I think that was 150 gram as well. So you can see compared to the TXL, it's more of a sort of through action rod, which you would expect, having a longer tip and a shorter butt. The butt section is still fairly firm. It feels feels slightly stiffer than the TXL, not by a massive margin, but enough that you know the difference. I heard someone quote a TXL is approximately 20% stiffer than an SU. Again, that doesn't mean it's better, just means it's a different style of rod. But it's definitely more give in the mid section of this rod. If you imagine this rod, the middle section here, that'd probably still be butt section on the TXL. So that probably explains it why. So first, this will probably be the first rod I go out casting again when we can get out casting again. Try some 125s and whatnot on it. So Zziplex M427. Both of them are very light rods. Yeah. So that's my M427SU. Okay, let's move on to the Zziplex full tournament rod. This is a really sweet rod. It's a bit shorter than the other two rods. It's 13'6". This is a slightly XL version. I think standard they were 13'2". They originally started off as a Primo full tournament in the sort of mid 2000s maybe, and then the new series, just called the full tournament, was introduced in 2010. I've had 2 or 3 of these over the years, and I've ended up selling them on. So an opportunity came up to buy one. I built run in good conditions. I thought, right, get the rod because I do love it. It's a 6'4" butt and a 7'2" tip, so it's a bit shorter than the other two. And the butt section is 25mm, again a couple of millimeter smaller than the TXL and the 427. It's about a 3.5mm tip section, so it's a lot finer tip. Quite a good fishing tip in this actually. Now it's no match rod by any means, but I would tend to use this for fishing more than the other two, because it can still punch out 6 ounces plus bait no problem, even though it feels very slim. Especially the tip section, as you can see. Compare that to the TXL. the midsection of the tip. Midsection of the rod is a lot fatter. So when I started casting again, I cast years ago when I was younger, 17, 18, then didn't really cast again until I was 35. When I started casting again, a friend of mine, Marty, lent me an old Zeteque TTR. And I was using it for about a month or two before I got this rope, before I got the full tournament. And then when I got the full tournament, I was a bit disappointed because it felt quite soft and didn't think it had the power compared to the TTR. But just had to work with it. And distance started rising and rising, and I actually set a Ulster 175 gram record with a full tournament, same length as this. No, it's actually a shorter one, 13.2 I set it with, of 254 meters on the 175 gram. And I set all my current PBs. Well, I set new PBs on the TXL recently, but I still have a 100 gram and 125 gram PB on a full tournament. So this is a fully built rod. It has UK hooks coasters, shrink tube, and then I don't really use this in any more than 125 gram at the moment, so that'll be 125 gram, 100 gram, and then toying about with 75 gram now and then. Going down to Zziplex full tournament with high build on it. Blue whippings with gold trim, Fuji or Pack Bay Minima 4, and blue whipping on the butt spigot there. Come down to the tip. It's a similar story. This rod's actually 8 plus tip, so there's a few extra rings compared to the other rods, which sort of helps for fishing because if you're pulling in a fish or whatever, it keeps the line off the blank when the rod's bent that way. So again, it'll be 30 mil, then 25, 20, 16, 12, 12, 10, 10, and this finishes with a 12 mil minimum tip. Unfortunately, don't do them in a big enough bore for the other rods, but good thing about the minima tips is, or rings, there's no insert in them, so sometimes occasionally you get a crack off and the shock leader whips through, pulls the insert out or bends it. You can just bend these back into shape. This is a lovely rod, very deceptive. It's by no means as powerful as the 427 and the TXL, but it can put a weight a long way. Bit of practice with it and you get used to it. I think put it just as far as the other two rods. I'm sure 300s will be done on this rod before, and I have a sneaking suspicion a couple of weeks ago. Me and Jonathan were casting down the beach and I was doing a couple of 100 grams in this in the big wind, and we walked up, we had flags measured out, 240 meters, 250, 260, 270, and then we put a flag in at 300 yards. Now I've done a couple of casts with 100 gram in this. Reeled them in, didn't think they were that good. Well, I thought they were alright, but I didn't come me bar walking down, so when we were picking the flags at the end of the day, there was a weight that landed 4 yards from the 300 yards, so I don't know if it was me or Jonathan. Between us both, we think it was probably me doing 100 gram on this rod, because on that particular day, my 150s, I was casting 150 and 100 gram. The 150s were about 255, 256 meters. So it's just possible almost on a 300 on this wee rod here. So this is the rod I use for fishing. I don't really want to scratch it, so I'm very careful with it. But probably a really good all-round long range fishing rod with a half decent enough fishing tip. I mean, you can get a lot rods with much better bite protection than that, but I'm not a huge fisherman as such, so that's the Sweet FT. Definitely one of the most underrated rods you can get. And last but not least, we come to the Lida Icon Light Sport. I bought this rod about a year ago. Just a lot of the boys in the casting club were casting plugs, and I thought, well, I wouldn't mind a rod for casting plugs plus a sort of lighter fishing rod for estuary fishing, flatty bashing and whatnot. So I picked this up second hand for around £60. Excellent condition. It's a very slim rod. I think it's 22 mil butt section, and the tip's under 3 mil, so well, around about 3 mil, but under. I didn't want to, a lot of the guys doing casting 18 gram plugs tend to use a Zziplex bait caster or profiles. I wasn't really that serious about casting the plugs, so I just thought I'd get something cheap to do me, which it has. I'm not a great caster of plugs. I think my PB is maybe 100 and, I think officially it's 104 yards or something. I've maybe done 110, 115 in the practice field. I find this is a lovely, lovely rod for fishing. It's 12'6", 2 equal sections, so they 6'3" each. A lot of rings on it. I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 rings. Good wee firm sort of, but I mean, I can put a good bend in it there. If you see a picture here in action, this is with a 4-ounce weight. So as you can see, that's with a 4-ounce weight. It does say on it here, optimum casting weight 3 to 5 ounce. I think that's pushing it a wee bit. I had a 5 ounce on it once before and I felt like it was going to break, and that was just a simple overhead thump, wee lob. So for me, I try to use this for 2-3 ounces for fishing, 4 possibly, but not pendulum casting 4 ounce. Nice gentle off the ground casting 4 ounce. But it casts 2 and 3 lovely, and 18 gram plug as well. It does me for that. I don't actually know what make these rings are, but I've heard the inserts are quite sensitive, and if you bash them, they just crack straight away. So you need to watch them crack it off rocks. And it removable or adjustable rail seat. If I'm casting these kind of plugs, I just use a fixed spool, so I tend to have it up there. Just use a fixed spool. I can fairly blast a 2 or 3 ounce a fair way, like even with bait, 150 yards probably. Very, very sensitive tip. I'm assuming it's glass tip up to some point, or it could be throughout, glass and carbon mix, but very, very sensitive tip. But it's, you can see yourself from there down to about there, then it sort of stiffened up from there on down. So that's my wee plug casting rod for what the odd time to do it. So generally if you're going fishing, I'll take the full tournament with a big bait, and then this here just cast a really small bait, and then a spinning rod as well if I want to chuck a wee spinner. So well, actually really nice finish in this rod. This is the Icon Sport. There we go. Black whippings with blue, white and red trim. Nice slim rod. 10 rings for some reason. It says rung for fixed spool and multiplier. Who knows? So anyway, that's my main rods I have at the moment. So hope you enjoyed that, and take care, and I'll see you next time.